All right, welcome to another episode of the No Script Show. I'm Conscious Caracal, Adams Van Sale, and I think we all are still dying to hear from another multi-millionaire celebrity on how easy it is to wait out this lockdown.
That's a point of contention. But let's welcome our guest. Let you introduce yourself, sir.
Hi there, I'm HabibiSouth on Twitter, also known as Ian Van Sale. I'm based in Cape Town, and I've been introduced to the show via a friend of a friend of a friend who seems to think that I'm this celebrity on a pedestal, but I'm not. I don't think you should be counting the zeros after the decimal, to be honest.
Well played there, well played. I have my wine poured here. Yes, I said wine, not whiskey, because I'm out of whiskey. I'm down to wine. I hope you have yours, Ian.
Odin, you are whiskey Wotan, but wine Wotan still has that alliteration factor.
So yeah.
Yeah, well, I've got, at the moment I'm drinking from two vessels. So on the one side, I'm still having my post-lunch coffee, but I've also started on a Baines Mountain Water whiskey. It's my last one, but as we celebrities always drink from a crystal decanter, I have just refilled my decanter and I'm actually switching to Jack. After, I'll be switching to Jack.
Odin's also a mutual friend of Jack.
Yes, I am.
Nice to know.
I think a lot of us, while we're discussing booze, a lot of us, what is your guys' take on this whole booze ban? Because I saw the initial motivation for the prohibition, which I thought was flawed, but anyway. And I saw recently they're sort of touting this because basically their rationale was we're banning booze, from what I understand, I speak under correction, to free up from the alcohol-related violence that occurs in South Africa, and this will help us free up beds for hospitals for COVID-19. And also, we're just going to ban cigarettes while we're at it, which I guess that has nothing to do with the illegal cigarette trade buddies that are friends with our government overlords. And so they've banned that, and they touted that, now suddenly there's this massive drop in violent crime and all that stuff. I'm like, maybe also partially because everyone's stuck at home.
You can leave this one in, Ian. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think when this was announced, looking at the tobacco one, in fact, first of all, nobody really explained why, and I thought it was because typically smokers that I know go to the shops to buy cigarettes maybe more than once a week, twice a week, 3 times a week. So it was maybe to restrict the movement, because not many people I know buy a carton of cigarettes at a time. So that initially was my thought, but then recently I saw from the Department of Health, no, it's all about the health implications. So it's all about smoking being bad for you and alcohol being bad for you. I don't know. So at the end of this lockdown, then why not continue with the ban? And I know Becky Cele would like to do that, but why not continue if it's really concern for our health? To me, it doesn't really make sense. Really, it boggles my mind. Maybe you have a better idea.
Well, interesting enough, this week I saw a study come out from based on COVID-19, and according to this study, smokers actually are showing less signs of catching the disease than non-smokers. I'm looking for it now because I actually it was very interesting, but they are unsure whether it's the smoke itself or the nicotine, but there's definitely a correlation there.
I read something like that as well. But in terms of alcohol, maybe there is some truth in the fact that South Africans don't know how to behave themselves, and that there are a lot of violent crimes associated with alcohol abuse. But I mean, we don't live in a nanny state, or at least I'd like to believe that we don't. That we actually appreciate that we are adults and that we know how to behave ourselves. I'm not sure the government really should be telling us what to drink and what to put in our mouths and how to behave afterwards. I don't think it's their position.
So here's the study. I found it, where here's a quote from the study. The preliminary analysis does not support the argument that the current that current smoking is a risk factor for hospitalization for COVID-19. Instead, nicotine may have beneficial effects on COVID-19. So whilst the study is far from perfect, and the authors are clear about this limitations, the evidence for a protective effect of smoking or nicotine against COVID-19 is bizarrely strong, actually far stronger than for any drug trial at this stage. So that's just a trivial thing. I'm not making the argument that actually everyone should be smoking. But it's just something very interesting that came to mind when we were talking about this. But what I do find troubling is that, well, the initial argument, as Odin said, was, but we're banning alcohol because then people won't go to the shops and people won't be beating each other and stabbing each other and whatever. Firstly, two things. First thing, if it was to prevent people going to the shops to buy alcohol, why are the military dumping homemade alcohol on the sidewalk of regular citizens? Yeah. Secondly, if it was there to stop people stabbing and beating and fighting each other, I made this argument on Twitter a while back where I was talking to a guy who said, no, it's good that it's being banned. Coincidentally, a non-drinker. Imagine my shock. So. He made the argument that South Africa is a violent society and this will make violent crime and domestic abuse and stuff go down. Two things there. Firstly, prohibition in America actually saw an increase in violent crime during that period of 14%. So that argument doesn't work. Secondly, it gave birth to one of the most famous organized crime rings in the world. Thirdly, and this is the last point that I made, was for every alcoholic during this time that goes sober because of the lockdown, there are going to be 10 others that are going to be being violent towards the people around them due to withdrawal and frustration about not being able to feed their addiction. And I think that's going to be much more prevalent than the guys actually dropping the habit. I think the guys either getting their alcohol or much higher percentage alcohol in the alleyway instead of tops, and then being in a worse condition, and also the guys not being able to get access to alcohol and just being violent to the people around them because they're getting withdrawals is going to be a much bigger effect than that one or two stories of the guy quitting.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, there's also, just while we're discussing alcohol and hospital beds and health effects, I wonder, what about all the people who are going to screw up home brewing and then they're going to go blind or get sick and then they're going to need medical attention? Right. What about them?
Ian, your thoughts on, firstly, my point and then Odin's?
Well, I think the view of seeing alcohol as the only cause for domestic violence or other sorts of violence is extremely one-dimensional. I think there are a lot of other things that we should consider. One of the underlying things, obviously, is socioeconomic inequality. You can't just say people who drink are the only ones who are violent. I think there are other things that lead to that. Family structure, for instance, and social the social structure around us is completely relevant in terms of what causes certain behaviors. I think it's very one-dimensional to think you're going to fix this problem by taking away just one thing. The other was, if I want to make something in my own backyard, or if I want to run a little microbrewery, and I'm not an expert at doing that, of course, there's the risk that I'm going to inflict some worse injury to myself than buying legit alcohol from a. And
obviously, not even talking about like brews going wrong and having toxicity in them. I think on average, that anything home brewed already has is going to on average have a higher alcohol content because there aren't as much controls. There isn't as much.
There's no
knowledge involved. It's just someone really experimenting for the most part. I think unless you've got a lot of experience with this, and I think a lot of people are now going to do it for the first time, you're just going to, on average, have a much higher alcohol content to your drink. Your drink might not be toxic. It might not be. You might make it perfectly, but I think it's definitely not going to be a 3%.
I think a valid point that you're making is that all of this activity is now being pushed underground, where government actually has less control. I mean, they don't have control over the illicit tobacco trade, and neither do they have control over this sort of backyard distilling and other processes. So I don't really see the benefit of doing that. If
they're missing out on a lot of taxes.
That's the other thing. They're missing out on a huge amount of revenue from these sin taxes. So absolutely.
Yeah, Odin?
Yeah, I mean, like, just to expand on that a bit, in terms of, and also not just booze and cigarettes, in terms of this regulation of only essential items can be sold. My question is, if the government, the guys, I think it was Dumo from the Man Patriot podcast posted this, if the government doesn't know who I am and what I need, what is an essential item? I mean, I've seen such a patchwork of this application. I've seen sort of pharmacies where like women's menstrual products are taped off. How the fuck do you think they're just going to stop menstruating for X number of months? I mean, yeah, I guess there's some areas.
Wait. Women can't just turn it off like a switch?
Well, it's funny you mentioned that, because I've also seen some areas where condoms have been taped off. So I guess a lot of women are going to stop menstruating, and we're going to need a lot of beds in about 9 months, but for different reasons. But like, it still goes to, my question is, what is an essential product? Because are the people that work in the booze and tobacco industry not subject to the laws of economic scarcity as well? Does the cashier not need money to buy food and drinks for themselves that works at the bottle store? And by that virtue, doesn't that mean that alcohol is an essential product because it drives this person's income? Like, what is an essential product? I just want to understand what that was.
Right. Ian?
Yeah, I think a major casualty in this whole process has been the economy, but not just the economy at a macro scale. I mean, personal finance. People are really suffering because of their livelihood being taken away from them, even if it might only be for a temporary time. For a lot of people, this has quite an amount of permanence to it. So I'm really concerned about that. But absolutely, who's to say what is essential to me and essential to somebody else? There's a question that keeps popping up about newborn babies, for instance, that need to be clothed, and especially now with the change of season. Clothing is not seen as an essential item, and so they can't get clothes. And children who are growing, for instance, and need new seasonal clothes, they can't get those, or at least their parents can't get their hands on those. It really is very arbitrary what's being said about what is essential and what is not, what is allowed and what is not, and what really poses a risk to our health and what not. The other question was this thing about cooked foods, which I think is absolutely absurd, but it's the same thing.
It's so bizarre.
Yeah, it's
go for it, Adam.
It makes me question if, again, with every measure that gets put in place, I start to wonder, and I mean, I always wondered. First of all, I think it's kind of disgusting how people are trying to make this a binary thing. Like, either you care about the virus or you just care about the economy. Like, you want grandma to die for the Dow Jones or the NASDAQ or the JSE or share. No, there's a hell of a lot of us who understand nuance and the consequences of not caring about one or the other. And you can care about both simultaneously. And secondly, with every measure that gets put in place, like this cooked food thing, it adds an extra layer of incredulity about this is just about the virus and keeping everyone safe.
And for me, it's just the tragic thing here is that already South Africa was in dire straits in terms of the economy. So people weren't saving, and I'm not talking about, or weren't saving because they didn't want to, because they couldn't. They just weren't able to. And I think in this crisis, that little bit of money that people have been saving is just being decimated. And it's just years of people really putting away little bit by little bit what they can afford to save, and now it's just being absolutely wiped out. But something that I have seen change recently is the attitudes around the lockdown. So since the extension date passed on Thursday, I've seen a lot of people change their tune. At the beginning, like I said on the previous episode, and on Politik, at the beginning it was novel. It was nice and, oh man, this is such an interesting new thing happening. Oh, here's my funny video. Here's my lockdown challenge. Here's a photo of me jogging in the garden. Lol, so funny, so interesting, so novel. Now it's starting to sink in, and people are saying it's not so funny anymore, and it's not so novel anymore. It's becoming normalized, and now I think you've seen in terms of who is supporting this type of lockdown. It's the type of people that can actually afford being locked down. So what you're seeing in terms of the people on Twitter and the media saying that it's not, we shouldn't open the economy are mostly the people that have kept their jobs and that aren't in a shitty situation. But regular South Africans who mostly are not on social media and who can't work from home, like mine workers, and standing in long lines for food and stressed and desperate, those folks are a bit in a different situation than the guy sitting at home working from home. And the big inconvenience is he can't get Uber Eats.
Yeah. Ooh, too bad. I can't get Uber Eats.
Yeah, I was just, Ernest, I was just about to ask you, where are you seeing this change of attitude? Are you seeing it on social media? Because we know who the typical social media user in our country is. One thing, maybe I'm skipping to a different subject now, but one thing that I'm sort of worried about is the feed of information. I'm not seeing a lot of other news being carried by the mainstream media. So everything is focusing just on the virus and the pandemic, and we're not seeing anything else. So I'm not seeing a lot of news reporting about protests or people getting unhappy about the lockdown. So what we're seeing, and at least what I'm seeing on Twitter, maybe because of the people I follow, is a lot of middle-class people who are sitting at home, who are still earning their pay. I'm not really seeing those disgruntled masses that I'm hearing about, but I'm not really seeing much evidence of that.
Yeah, but I think it's because the people on social media aren't really the masses that are looting shops. I think the people that are on social media are pretty much, I think, and I know Twitter is not, or social media is not real life, but I think if you had to take a demographic that is most accurately represented by the views on social media, it would be the middle class. I think the social media is a pretty decent, not perfect, but a decent aggregate of middle class sentiments. And what I'm seeing here is, like I said earlier, it was novel and interesting. And, oh, man, I can put on some funny photos on Twitter and Facebook and make some jokes about it. But now we're seeing more and more people, especially now that the idea of a lockdown extension indefinitely being extended constantly, that seed has been planted. And now people aren't as good, as supportive anymore. People are starting to ask the question, like I predicted, that if you can extend it once, why not for a second, third, fourth, fifth time? Why should I believe you this time? And what happens is, so the first time you announced the lockdown of 21 days, now you're saying, well, my fellow South Africans, we need to stand together. We will overcome this. We are bigger than this. And then everyone's riled up. Everyone's happy. Everyone's like, yeah, fucking fire up. Then the extension comes, and then you repeat yourself and you say, oh, well, I regret to inform you, you have given us these 21 days and been strong, but we are going to have to do it again for 2 weeks. But we are bigger than this, and we will overcome it. That's going to get old very quickly, and it's going to be a very steep incline of the law of diminishing returns, where the first time you're going to get this really big swell of support from the populace. The first extension already, that's going to be cut in half. And the third, I don't even think we can afford a third extension without serious loosening of the restrictions, without just causing people to completely disregard the lockdown.
I think that's what we're seeing from around the world is there are many countries where the lockdown has been extended, and in some cases quite extreme extensions. We've seen some countries where they're extending by months. If they were to do something like that here, it would be disastrous.
Yeah, those countries where the lockdown has been extended, just again, I have to point out, are in a, as you guys both know, are in a wholly different socioeconomic situation, and also they didn't institute prohibition. Yeah. I speak to my friends overseas in the UK and especially in the US, like they can still order stuff off Amazon, anything they want. They could, well, I believe there was some Amazon employee explaining how some things were blocked. Like this poor guy had to go on a stand and start talking about how dildos are not an essential item.
I mean, as far as I understand it, some like food services are open as well. Like
exactly.
Stuff. Yeah.
No, it's an interesting point. Should the lockdown be proportional to what extent the country and the people of the country can afford it? Because I think what we're seeing is the inverse of that. It's disproportionate. Our lockdown is much more draconian than a lot of other countries, but we're the ones who can least afford it, to be honest, in terms of economical terms. And in terms of infection rate, we're just not seeing the same levels that they've seen in Europe and that they've seen in North America yet. We're just, I think, weeks or months behind that. or the testing here is just not happening. I'm not sure what exactly is the case there.
Right. So I've just got a message in my ear from our marketing department here at the No Script Show. Mr. Moja, I think we have a episode to show just quickly here that was released this week with a very special guest.
Oh, yes. Well, normally we do adverts mid-episode, but I guess the marketing department is requiring me to do this advert. Well, I'm going to do a shill episode for a previous episode that was just released before this one. A man who has been compared to being an African Donald Trump in some cases and I think wrongly slandered as an EFS shill, but he's a man of great stature on the South African landscape, and he is one Mr. Herman Mashaba, a self-made multi-millionaire. We recently sat down with him and talked about all manner of topics, from apartheid infrastructure versus ANC infrastructure, mother tongue education, firearms rights, and having strong borders. And and the man pulled no punches. I think given everything that's happened to the man over the last couple of decades, the ups and downs, I think that this is an episode that's definitely worth a watch, along with his documentary now called Forgotten Peoples, which sort of documents what he actually achieved for a lot of people in Joburg. Because while many middle upper class people say he got nothing done, they fail to realize that there's an entire Joburg outside of Craighall and Sandton that needed a lot of things done first. So I highly suggest you watch our episode and you give the Forgotten Peoples documentary a watch. Check it out today.
Yeah, go check it out, man. And now to get back to our current guest, Ian, what is your field of expertise, man? Like, where does your interests and also your knowledge lie in terms of what are you an expert on?
Wow, that's a very difficult question. I don't think I'm an expert on anything, but I'm an observer. So I'm looking at what's happening in the world, and I like to make up my own mind. So my background many years ago was actually in the humanities, so in languages and also languages and musicology. But currently I work in the field of technology and specifically in satellite and space technology.
Oh, nice.
But my interest in current affairs and politics, completely hobby. There's really no expertise there. It's really just observation and then trying to make an assessment of what I see and make my own mind up. And not just be part of the flock or the herd and not just following blindly.
No, that's excellent, man. And Odin, I think this gives us a nice opportunity to touch on the tech side of this episode. Is there anything you wanted to discuss?
Well, yeah, but let me first off start by saying one of my greatest lamentations is and I pointed this out with Quentin. I pointed this out on Twitter a bunch of times. Ian points out he's, in the humanities. One of my greatest lamentations is what has become of liberal arts education. Because, for the bad reputation it has now, decades ago, it was highly sought after and regarded because it didn't teach you what to think. It taught you how to think about the world and make up your own mind and all that. And there was something genuinely valuable about sort of Western liberal arts education. And it hurts my heart to see what's become of it. Honestly, it just it makes me sad. That's all I'm going to say. Tech-wise, let's see. Tech-wise, do you want to discuss anything in particular, or can I just spitball anything random on tech? Nothing particular? No? Okay, cool. Then I'm going to do my thing. Okay, first of all, in virus-related news, a couple of years ago, there was a cool, quote-unquote cool incident in a video game I was sort of addicted to at the time called World of Warcraft. And there was an incident called the Great Blood Plague. And the Blood Plague is basically it was a debuff you got from a certain boss that slowly drained your health, or more horrifically drained your health if you're a lower level character. And what a group of people did on some servers is decided, cool, we're going to get out of this dungeon, but we're going to kill the boss and we're going to make sure a couple of our people have this debuff on them still. And then we're going to let them move around. Like it spreads through contact. Like the debuff basically, I think you're seeing where I'm going with this. And it's spread by you being within a certain range of another character in the game. And they went to like some of the home major cities of the different factions and races. And they started spreading this for fun. And it became this whole huge thing where, because like if you're a level 60 in World of Warcraft, it was like no problem. If you're level 20 in World of Warcraft, you're going to die pretty quickly from that Blood Plague debuff. And this thing became so huge that it actually became something that was studied in virology. And my point with this is it's very interesting how this whole spread with COVID-19 is happening, in that I wonder if there isn't more of an opportunity for people to sort of cross-reference scientific disciplines to help figure out how to combat this thing better, because obviously it's a bioscience issue, but I think that there's also a lot of space for the different sciences to sort of coalesce and work together on this situation.
All right. Yeah, no. Ian, your thoughts?
It certainly makes me think. There's a lot of talk about, it's become a catchphrase, this thing about flattening the curve. It seems there's a lot of misunderstanding. People think flattening the curve, that means that we avoiding this, that we're curing this disease, if I can rephrase. People think that by flattening the curve, we're curing it. And also, there are some people who think that a vaccine is a cure for people who are already infected.
Right.
Which means, there's a very basic lack of understanding. I'm not a virologist, but this is just common sense. Absolutely, this can be looked at not from just one point of view, in other words, virology, and at a molecular level or a biological level, at the level of the cell or the organism, but it has to look at how we interact as humanity, in terms of how we interact in families and groups and our spheres of influence and how we move. So definitely we have to look at things, the freedom of movement as well. And we have to look at economic activity. People move in certain ways because of the necessity. They need to go to work, or they need to go to points of commerce. And therefore there are other ways of looking at this. Not just from the organism's point of view, but also from the sort of society's point of view.
Yeah. I tend to agree with that there's a number of ways to look at this. I think he capped that one pretty well. The only other subject I've got a couple of tech subjects, oddly enough, this week. One of the other subjects I wanted to discuss was the difference between particle interaction when it comes to temperature. Okay, and I just thought this would be a fun little lesson to teach everyone. Totally off topic, but whatever, it's our show. So my question is, would you rather put your hand in a 100-degree pot of water or a 100-degree oven? Which one would you choose? Either of you guys can answer this, like whatever you want.
Neither.
Ernst?
Wow.
Not making a choice is a choice.
I would say the oven. I would choose the oven above the water.
Yeah,
that is the smart choice. And if you have to do it for 5 seconds, that's also the smart choice. And the reason is this: obviously you would know, you've put your hands in an oven before, and it's when you take something out the oven, if it's 100 degrees, 180 degrees, whatever, versus putting your hand in a pot, even if it's protected, a pot of boiling water. And this comes down to the concept of particle interaction. So as we all know, temperature is basically just an aggregate of the kinetic energy of the particles of a substance. Now, you can have a 100-degree oven, which means the air in there is at 100 degrees Celsius, and a 100-degree pot of water, which means the water molecules, 100 degrees Celsius. Why it doesn't burn your hand instantaneously to a crisp when you put your hand in a 100-degree oven versus when you put your hand in a boiling pot of water comes down to particle interaction. That is to say, the density of the air, even the densest gases out there, I don't think, unless we're talking about like super gases out in the universe, but we're not looking at exceptions. Even the densest gases out there aren't as dense as water. So what happens when the water is 100 degrees Celsius is that your hand instantly comes into contact with all those particles hitting your hand with that 100-degree temperature, quote unquote. Whereas when you put your hand in an oven full of hot air, you're only getting hit by 1 or 2 particles every now and then. Now, obviously, your hand will heat up eventually, but it'll take a lot longer because there's a lot less particle interaction between your hand and air versus your hand and water. And hence, that's the kicker when it comes to particle interaction. And that's my fun little science lesson for today.
The science
Yeah,
show.
makes a lot of sense.
Right.
Yeah.
So I've just, while I've been listening, I've checked here. Someone sent me this. It seems like a Johannesburg DA councillor is snitching on people selling coffee. Those fucking monsters. This guy, he's like, wait, where's that tweet now? I actually want to read the video because the real tweet's he's so breathless. He's clutching at his pearls like, what the fuck, Four Nose Bakery? Your Dunkveld outlet in Josie is selling takeaway coffee, not practicing social distancing and allowing people to sit outside the shop on the curb at SAP Police Service. Joburg MPP. At City of Joburg ZA. At BizPortal Gov ZA. At RK Gazette. At March.
People have too many characters on Twitter sometimes.
Can we just get over the snitching? Like, honestly, I mean, I saw the one picture of that one dude like paddling out alone in the ocean somewhere in Malibu or something, and they sent like a ship, and then they sent 2 officers to handle him. And like, I get that there's the seriousness to the virus, but can we just get over the snitching for like 2 seconds? Like, I don't understand this absolute moral superiority people feel when they snitch on people. It's just like you said. It's like, oh no, how could people snitch on people, in this regime? I would never be like that. But there's this meme where it's like, if you snitch on Anne Frank, if you'd snitch on somebody now, you'd snitch on Anne Frank and Harriet Tubman. And although it's not exactly the same, it's close enough. I feel, that's a fairly accurate meme.
Yeah, it's like, hello police, I'd like to report some people not living in fear.
Yeah, it's just, it's ridiculous to me. I don't understand the moral superiority people feel. And I think that this is a blessing in disguise because it helps me narrow down who I'm going to invite to my braai when all of this is over.
Oh, right. No, definitely, man. And it like I said, in a crisis, you really get to know who your real friends and enemies are, and you see the true side of people. And I'm not. If I see anyone in my friend circles taking part in this despicable behavior, I'm not. I'm not going to be having them around my house anytime soon. What if they see me doing a tiny little thing wrong, and then the next day the police come knock on my door? I don't know. I don't trust these people anymore. Seeing if they are willing to report drinking coffee on the curb, this guy's going to report you for the tiniest of things.
Yeah, I don't know about you in Cape Town, Ian, but I think it's for us here on Highveld, it's a lot of these upper middle class, well-to-do sort of moral busybodies. I don't know what the environment is like down in the Cape.
Absolutely, it's moral busybodies, but it also shows me 2 things. First of all, how easy it is for people to do that without thinking twice, and also without thinking what they would do if somebody did that to them. But also, it's showing me an underbelly of our society that I really don't like to see. It's showing me a really sort of dark and evil side that we can laugh at it and we can play it down, but it does show me something about solidarity in terms of society. I don't move about a lot, so I have really been staying at home. Mostly since even before the lockdown. I don't interact with my neighbors. I don't see anybody else, but I also don't mind what other people are doing. I mind my own business. But what I did see, I think it was about 2 weeks ago, there was a woman who lives in a place called Komiki, which is a seaside neighborhood of Cape Town. And she posted pictures of a woman going for a walk on the beach, an abandoned beach. But it was this woman going for a walk, and then she and this woman on Twitter and another one had a whole discussion about how this woman on the beach thinks that she can't get the virus and she can't spread the virus. And then the conclusion was, this is absolute white exceptionalism. So that's what they were talking about. And my response was just simply, woman, you live in an exclusively white neighborhood. Maybe if you moved your ass to the rest of South Africa and see how the rest of us live, you would see a very different picture out on the street, and you wouldn't just jump to these sort of easy conclusions. People take an enormous amount of joy and glee from snitching, and I don't understand. It really shows me a very dark side of their nature.
Yeah. Well, I'm not the expert on human behavior, being a computer scientist, but I think Aaron's like, what do you think on that dark underbelly of human behavior?
Right. No, it always comes to the fore, man. You and me have talked about this so many times. This idea of in the past people were stupid. We're now in the 21st century. We're enlightened. We're not going to make the same mistakes as those people. Like, no, man. If I put you in that exact same situation, there's a very strong chance you're also going to do the exact same things that you criticize people in your hindsight over. There's really not an IQ difference between you or someone from an authoritarian regime in the 1900s, unless there's like he has not as good a diet or some other environmental thing that's actually making him genuinely stupid.
Yeah, and I know
Sorry, Arden. I just have a question about that. If you snitch on somebody, what is it that you are trying to achieve? Is it that you are trying to achieve this, curb the spread of the virus, or do you really want to inflict some harm on the person that you are reporting to the police? Right. What is your motivation? Because I think that is I don't think that the answer to that is always very clear cut. I think it could be both.
I think there's a large factor of this person had the temerity to break free of the lockdown. I want to punish you for breaking free when I didn't get to do it either. There's a large dollop of that in the recipe of snitching,
right?
Which is again just hard. It's like you said, like Anne said, like we all think we're better. I mean, if people like to think I would have been this amazing hero,
paragon of virtue
that saved all the Jews or hid all the Jews. Like, no, if you were in Nazi Germany, there's a large statistical probability you'd be one of the people, sort of, just reporting the Jews for the greater good, because that's the thing. People, I think a lot of people fail to understand that. You realize that a lot of the Germans at that time genuinely thought they were doing the right thing. They thought this is for the greater good.
No, you're completely wrong. They woke up in the morning and rubbed their hands together and think how can I be the most evil, despicable piece of shit today? What, you're telling me they were real people with real opinions and not just fucking demons with inherent evil and trying to just be the biggest piece of shit ever? That's preposterous.
That's what I'm suggesting here. That's honestly what I'm suggesting here. But yeah, that's just my take on it.
I think the bottom line just remains like I've said for a long while now. Humans are inherently evil, but we have immense potential for good. That doesn't mean we are evil beings. It just means we need to understand that just as we have immense potential for good, we also have immense potential for evil. Because like Solzhenitsyn said, there aren't evil and good people in the world. The line between good and evil runs through the heart of every man.
Yeah, exactly.
There's another dimension to this that I've just thought of. If we are going to talk about Nazi Germany and compare, in Nazi Germany, the people who were the snitchers, did they want to make that known, or did they do it sort of anonymously? The reason I'm asking this is what we're seeing now with social media. Two things. First of all, there are people who are helping the needy, but they are doing it in such a way that they are showing it to the world. So they want to be seen to be dishing out charity. But on the other side of that, the snitchers are doing it quite publicly. And so they want to be seen, or at least they allow themselves to be observed doing that. Which I'm not sure was the same thing in Germany, where the people wanted to be known as snitchers. Here, it seems people are allowing themselves to be known as such. Look at sorry to mention names, but look at Nikolaus Bauer and Adrian Basson. They do this, and they have a large following. They do it very publicly, and they enjoy to be seen doing that.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point, Ian. Definitely. There's a big difference between, and that's why I'm glad you brought it up. Big difference between the guy that snitches or reports his neighbors to the police anonymously, and the person that goes on social media into the public square and proclaims, I was an evil piece of shit.
I think in Nazi Germany, though, as to the best of my knowledge, they were encouraged, they were incentivized to turn in Jews, and any information leading to from what I've read, it's similar with China now, like any information leading to the turn-in of dissidents. So that's the thing with authoritarian regimes.
Korea as well. What they did in North Korea, still do in North Korea, was they have like meetings. I don't know how often, but like every few months they have a meeting of a ward. Like all the neighborhoods are divided into wards. So the ward comes together, and you have to report someone that said something against the government or broke a law. And it's almost like a sacrifice that needs to be made. And then you just let people live in fear. Like even if that person did nothing wrong, there's always going to be a human sacrifice.
But don't you think that makes our situation even worse, even sadder? Because here there is no real pressure. Nobody is threatening you if you're not snitching, and so these people make a choice. It's an absolute voluntary thing that they do to do that so publicly. That's why I'm saying it's the underbelly of evil. It fills me with disgust.
Yeah, because I mean, you touched on it where you said you are trying to hurt this person. You are trying to bring about malice into this person's life. Nothing good will come to this person from you publicly reporting them. That was like when the other day I told Odin I was driving down the street to go buy something. But this is a while back. It was at the beginning of the lockdown. And there was a guy jogging. And I'm like, I could be an atomic level prick right now. Like roll down my window and like shout at this guy. Like, go home. You're endangering lives. And then I was like, but I've got no inclination to. I just drove on.
It's almost like people want to make themselves judge and jury. And at the same time, they need to signal this virtue. It just boggles my mind. I really don't understand this. Yeah.
Give me my social credit points.
It's a horrific step in a dystopian sort of direction, and I don't think I've much left to say on that particular subject, but I do have a lot to say on politics and stuff. If you guys want to look at some US politics,
transition us into the next topic.
Absolutely.
The US politics scene. I don't know I don't know how familiar you are with that.
Well, the most amusing thing I've seen is just seen what's become of Pete. What's his name? Buttigieg. Have you seen what he looks like?
Buttigieg.
Is it Buttigieg? Is it Buttigieg?
Buttigieg.
Buttigieg. Okay, fine.
I think he's cut his own hair or something.
What?
But yeah, he must have cut his own hair or something. If you saw a recent sort of televised like a Skype interview with him, he looks awful. He's not the beautiful boy of Democrat politics anymore.
Aww.
He's literally become Mr. Burns from The Simpsons.
Between him and Beto, those are like the pretty boys of the Democratic establishment.
Who speak Spanish and who drink hard liquor out of paper bags. Those boys.
Or like Hillary Clinton that says when she's talking to a black crowd, I carry a bottle of hot sauce in my purse.
There are few things more condescending than that. Wow. But there are three very specific people I'd like to discuss this week on the US politics section, and that is AOC.
Oh my God!
Donnie from Queens, of course, Donald Trump, and my long-standing rival Elon Musk. Okay.
Oh, okay.
Shakes his. My first thing. I will start with AOC. Because recently, AOC hit the news, page for a different reason. In that she voted against, I shit you not, repealing SALT deduction cap, which was a Trumpian sort of measure, which stands for I believe sales and local taxes cap, which is for the TLDR of it is that. It's basically a cap that I believe the Trump administration created, which puts a cap on how much sales and local taxes you can levy against people in the market. And it's actually a pretty anti-poor thing because, as it turns out, rich people are pretty good at moving their money out of the country and evading taxes because they're rich. So SALT actually really hurt only like middle-class people. And the Trump sort of cap that they put on that actually kind of helped in that you cannot tax more than this, which is good for people who live in extremely high tax states like California or her home state of New York. And the big hubbub was about it was that it was a Trump administration measure, and she, AOC, the darling of the Democratic establishment, actually voted against repealing a Trump administration measure, and the media lost its ever-loving fucking mind. Half of the establishment quickly did the mental gymnastics to sort of justify why this is okay, and the other half was like, oh God, how can AOC betray us like this? And I say good AOC. You finally understand a little bit of economics. And I'll say this, like, Ernst and I are both on this train in that we no longer believe in politics being a team sport. If somebody does something right or good or whatever that I agree with, I'm going to say good for you on that. If Julius Malema and the EFF tomorrow decided to privatize ESCOM and all that, I would be out there rooting for them.
Yeah.
So
and even
yeah,
if it's someone on my side, if they are on my team, if you will, if you want to use those terms, if they are doing something wrong, then they can get bent, man. Like
So-
this whole teams tribe bullshit thing with the politics thing about blue team, red team is really just it's the stupidest thing.
I mean, honestly, her decision to vote against that repeal, good for her. I don't know if you guys want to chime in on that, but good for her, I say.
Go for it, Ian.
Just refresh me. Was that the one where she was basically the only Democrat who voted against, or one of very, very few? Was it that one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Assault is target economic assault. Governor said last March, 15 states. That's the states most hurt by the reduction of deductibility. The state of New York. Yes, because you can no longer deduct crazy amounts of taxes. Too bad. Yeah.
Well, I think one question that comes to mind, and without being a complete bitch about this, but just judging by her track record, did she know what she was doing when she was doing it?
I don't actually know. That's a fair point.
I was elected to lead, not to read.
That's a fair point. I mean, she was literally a bartender before this. It's an incredible country.
Well, and an actress who had auditioned for her position.
Yeah.
No, look. I'm not saying that she didn't know, and I'm asking because I genuinely don't know, and I haven't really followed this point particularly closely.
I'm going to assume she had time to read it since they're all in lockdown.
Okay.
I don't know, but she voted against it. I've seen. I think it was in the Huffington Post that they wrote this whole long article, but like, actually, it's okay that AOC voted in accordance with this Trump measure, blah, blah, blah. And again, for me, it says, do you realize how much you're just flaring out how you're team orientated? That like, regardless of what the bill does or doesn't do, like you guys making a deal about who made this measure tells me that you're so team orientated. It's insane.
All right. But that's the thing about American politics is that I think we've seen a lot of cases now where even a broken clock is right twice a day. But at the same time, it's all so much theater, dude. Like, it's not South African politics, even though one guy summed it up like this. He said, American politics is like WWE and South African politics is like a gang war.
That's actually quite accurate.
Yeah. So in American politics, it's all this bluster and all this theatrics and all this just spectacle. And in South African politics, it's just all this backstabbing and sleaziness and just terrible, dirty, filthy stuff. So what you're seeing in America, and that's what and I'm not praising any aspect of this about the theatrics of it. I actually find it quite irritating sometimes. I do find entertainment in it. It can be entertaining at times. But sometimes I'm just like, come on, guys. Like, you honestly, you're the most powerful nation in the world, and this is what your politics looks like. Sometimes even I get a bit overwhelmed by the theatrical, almost Hollywood nature of their politics.
Yeah.
It's interesting how they can allow themselves to be so hamstrung by the bipartisan setup there. Is where Congress and Senate really can't get anything done because if the one belongs to the Republicans and one to the Democrats, they will always sort of cancel each other out. But also where there's this culture of just continuously voting against what your opposition proposes.
Right.
It's like they can't get away from that. So that makes me quite interested if we come back to the SALT thing. What did Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar, how did they vote? I mean, because they're often mentioned in the same sort of breath as AOC. Do we know how they...
I haven't seen them mentioned in any of the
okay,
articles.
okay.
I think the focus has been solely on AOC.
Yeah. So she must have done something quite exceptional, I think, in that case.
Yeah, it's just it's out there. Some people are losing their damn minds about this.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's again, like you said, the way they can be so hamstrung by this bipartisanship. By the way, it's similar with this mask debate that's going on, because a lot of libertarians I see, because I'm technically a libertarian, I see are going ass crazy on like, oh, I will not wear a mask. It's equivalent to Sharia. I'm like, no, it's just not being an asshole to people.
Yeah.
Like, I'm voluntarily wearing it on the off chance that I'm infected and slightly to protect myself. I'm not going to wear it when this is over, when we've reached herd immunity or some sort of vaccine. Like, relax. It's just.
I think the other interesting thing about the masks is just the psychological aspect of it. Even if you don't have the disease, psychologically, if you're wearing a mask in public and you're not mandated to, it's almost like a signal of goodwill to your fellow citizens, where you're saying, I'm taking the bigger picture into account. I'm taking every precaution. I'm just not being responsible.
Yeah, I am taking it seriously.
Yes, I think it's on just a very basic societal trust and social fabric level. I think it plays a role in terms of just showing cooperation within communities, and also just giving some good vibes to people in terms of showing that you take this seriously. And even though it might work or not, you still are taking every precaution you can. That is not ridiculous.
Yeah. Plus, it's just such a lost opportunity for a fashion accessory. Come on, guys. Let's get creative. Come on. It's just come on. Yeah. It's just also, while we're at it on things on the libertarians and the conservatives, I see again this debate is broken out over should we write, well, at least in the States, should we write a law against porn, like ban porn or like legislate porn, or just. I've kind of reached this point where, like, look, if you don't like, and I'm not denying that there can't be detrimental mental effects from using too much porn. I'm not denying that there isn't some messed up stuff that happens as a result of porn due to human trafficking and all that kind of stuff. And I'm not trying to belittle that. But when you want to write a law against it, and again, it's the conservatives, it's the Republicans who were supposedly all about family values and sorting things out in your community. I am of the opinion that maybe raise your damn kid yourself, and they will have the temerity, or not the temerity, or rather the fortitude not to go overboard on the Pornhub subscription or whatever fucking site you're on. Yeah. They'll have the strength to not go overboard on that. The same reason that I have the strength not to become a full-blown alcoholic or whatever is the same reason with porn. I'm raised in a certain way that I have enough support structures in my life that, you know, I don't need that law against it. I would rather that than us making a law against every single perceived ill that happens to come up.
Right. And you're just giving more power to the state, and that you're not going to stop it. Like I said, this is just like alcohol prohibition. You're just people are going to get what they want, even if there's a law against it. But as someone on the right politically, I would say my answer would be pretty much dovetail with yours. I don't know, I've said it multiple times on the show. If you are community-centered and you care about a healthy community, a community of good values, solid values, then if your community, individuals within your community are exposed to pornography and they just turn into addicts almost on a bizarrely alarming rate, then there's something wrong with your community. Then you need to look at the value foundations of your community and see where this is coming from. It's not the pornography doing it. It's because there's definitely then a deficiency in terms of your community's immunity to these types of ills. It's the same with alcohol. If your community has a disproportionate amount of alcoholics, there's something wrong within your community value-wise and society-wise. And I think you can take this, the microcosm of the community would be your family. I think first and foremost, a family needs to almost immunize and vaccinate itself against things like alcoholism or porn addiction or any type of addiction like this by having strong core values, strong bond, a high trust environment within the family, and also a high trust environment within the society. I think a lot of these ills, you can't regulate it away. It's always going to be there because you're treating the symptom, not the disease itself. The disease itself is on a societal level, there's an absence of the type of values that prevent this type of addiction.
Ernst, I'm so glad you said that, because that was exactly what I was thinking now. And we were talking about this earlier, talking about, stopping alcohol sales, whether that is going to address the problem of violent behavior. And that's exactly what the conclusion is. The alcohol abuse is not the problem. It's a symptom of a larger ill in society. So I'm so glad that you mentioned that. But just coming back to porn, I think we need to distinguish between two very separate, disparate things here. One is the regulation, because people are seeing some sort of existent or non-existent correlation between porn and other societal ills. That's right. One thing. And, people have been trying for so long to establish that link, and they can't, because you might as well say everybody with milk in their fridge who is a rapist or a serial killer, the problem is the milk. They're trying to establish these links and they can't. But I think the real problem is, if we look at Pornhub, and one of the reasons it's been in the news is because there is material on there that is depictions of abusive behavior, depictions of minors and things like that. So that problem does need to be addressed in my mind. It's not a question of taking away porn and denying the end users the ability to access the material, but it's the nature of the material that should or should not be online, available online. And right. That is, I think, a very clear and necessary distinction to make.
I think the exact same equivalent would be if there was a certain type of alcohol being sold at Tops or any type of mainstream store that was poisoning a bunch of people. Then I think I would support any type of intervention there to stop this. I think this is the exact same situation where just because there is this element doesn't mean that you just do a blanket ban. Then let's address the very specific problem and let's get that out of the way as quickly as possible and have a focused policy approach to this rather than just a broad shotgun approach. So you take a sniper approach rather. Put a bullet in the brain of the pedophiles, if that's what
absolutely. I would like to believe that we live in a mature democracy, or I'm talking about South Africa in particular, where we, the voters, are given the freedom of our conscience to act accordingly. So if I want to consume porn, I should be able to do that if I'm not harming anybody else in the process. I really should, in a liberal society, I should be able to do that. And that the same thing applies to everything else, with things as diverse as carrying or owning a weapon, or being able to marry somebody of the same sex and so on. So I think if we really want to call ourselves liberal on the one hand, but also we want to call ourselves secular, we need to allow a bunch of things that aren't always morally congruous with things like the Bible or the Quran.
Yeah, I come from I'll jump on, well, two things. First of all, in what you said there about the type of content that's there, I can't remember who it was, but I was watching some documentary on the sex industry and porn and all that, and one of the ladies who'd retired from porn said something to the effect of, towards the end of her career, she really stopped enjoying some shoots, not because she was tired, but because of the nature of what they were shooting. Like the sex was becoming increasingly rougher. The depiction of the sex was becoming increasingly abusive. And like you said, with depiction of minors, abuse, all sorts of stuff. I don't care what sort of orientation of porn you're watching, like this depiction of minors and also there's a lot of there's memes now of like Pornhub stepsister X or whatever. And this sort of links with what Aaron said, is that given my upbringing, I find the idea of if I'm sort of presented with that, it's repulsive to me on a base level to think of a depiction of somebody so young, or a depiction of somebody, because they're trying to get especially younger looking porn stars that are technically of age. Some of them may not be, because there's underground stuff in the industry, as I admitted earlier, and they're depicting rougher and rougher stuff, and I would not click on that. I just find the idea of that so repulsive. And this links with what Aaron said about being inoculated against that sort of stuff. And then for me as well, I come from I wouldn't say extremely conservative family, but we still, have Sunday lunches, and we used to, and say grace around the table and all that stuff. And I am 100% in favor of separation of church and state. Like, I don't want any law based on like the that is to say, obviously there's a lot of laws in Western countries that you could extrapolate from things like the Ten Commandments, but I don't want the Bible or the Quran or whatever to be the single motivation as to why we have this law. You know, it's,
right. But I think the majority of Christians are against or are for the separation of church and state because of the fact that they understand that that church is not going to necessarily be the Christian church in their country, and it might not be that in the future. It might be that currently, but in the future it might not be. So I think the majority of even religious people know or understand that, and that's why I think the most are also against, for example, the state regulating religions in a regard. As the church stays out of the state, and the state stays out of the church in a large extent. And I think what we're seeing here now in modern times is that you're seeing some other religions in the world not really grasping that idea that a theocracy might not be the best path to prosperity.
Yeah, I think that also one of the other reasons for the separation of church and state is, well, aside from that whole, like you said, that whole, it could flip, like the levers of power could change hands. One of the other good reasons for separation of church and state is because once you have a joining of church and state, you have a sort of cloud of legitimacy lended to that religion. As to why, I mean, remember in days of old in England and all that sort of stuff, the king was ordained by God himself. It's only once we had that separation of church and state, once we had religious and secular freedom, where you could criticize Christianity, that some of the more horrific things, I mean, look, there's still some bad things that are done in the name of Christianity, but you know, it's only once you had that separation and that religious freedom to criticize did you see some actual good reform happening within Christianity, and I want that good reform to happen for, you know, whatever your religion may be.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's just always, to me personally, it's important to understand that there's a choice at the level of the individual and that there's personal agency. So it's up to you whether you want to click on something or not click on something. I'm really against the idea of the state telling you whether you should or should not, or whether you can or can't. But I do have this exception if it's illegal material or it's something that is, by the vast consensus, so immoral. It really just should not be available. And especially, you know, I like to see Pornhub as a legitimate site. You know, it's not on the dark web. It's something out on the open. It's something that people talk about in the open, and people brag about it as well. You know, it's kudos if you have a Pornhub subscription or you give your grandfather one for Christmas and things like that. We laugh and joke about that thing. So it really is quite legitimate and out in the open. I think the attitude towards porn has changed in the last sort of 20 years. But there are limits to what should be accessible and what not.
But I think it's completely possible with the technology and what we have today to regulate that pretty effectively without going all draconian. I think it's actually quite easy now to monitor what goes on the site, and to with the types of AI that we have now. I mean, Odin, you're pretty much well aware of this.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, also, should we be looking at the worst person in our society in order to regulate the behavior of the rest of us? And so therefore, if I can just bring this back to the issue of alcohol abuse, should we who are moderate drinkers be prohibited from using the alcoholic substance because there are alcoholics in society and people who turn violent and abusive? I don't think that we should. I don't think we should extrapolate the worst behavior and use that as a prohibitive norm for everybody else.
Exactly. It's collective punishment, basically.
Yeah. Odin, can we start wrapping this up? Because I've unfortunately got other obligations that I got to get to now at 3. So not immediately, but just a signal that we can...
Cool. Two more things in US politics I quickly want to bullet through. Firstly, Donnie from Queens and versus President Trump. You know, as you may or may not know from episodes on the show, there are times where Donald Trump is President Donald Trump when he actually does something good, and then because he's Donnie from Queens and you can't take the Queens out of the New Yorker, you can't resist but get on the damn Twitter and do something that just makes me go insane. Okay, and President Trump, for starters, in his President Trump capacity, he basically is listening to his experts, despite what some people may say. Maybe, and some people on the right say he's listening to his experts too much. In terms of he said, I would like to open the country as soon as possible. But we're going to look at strategies, whether it's a big opening or a piece by piece opening, and that's not a bad way to look at it. That's very President Trump. But then, because he's Donnie from Queens, he had to go and be Donnie from Queens. And somebody criticized Dr. Anthony Fauci and tweeted something about him taking too long to open the country. And he said, #fire Fauci. And Donnie from Queens retweeted this because he thought that Anthony Fauci was ripping on him. Meanwhile, Fauci is going out of his way not to rip on Trump, and the media is trying to drive a wedge between them. And Donnie from Queens, being thin-skinned, decided, you know what, I'm going to retweet this. And I was like, why, Donnie? Why did you need to do this? This was so unnecessary. I kind of sat there. I was like, okay, fine, whatever, man. You're going to retweet this rando with like 200 followers saying #fire Fauci. Go ahead, bud. Like, that was my Donnie from Queens moment. And then with my rival Elon Musk, quick thing. He got called out apparently for not delivering ventilators that he bought. Now, I keep saying that multiple things can be true at the same time. And he took on CNN, rightly, saying, I have the receipts for these ventilators, blah, blah, blah. I don't know who's saying that they haven't been delivered. The problem with this is that the ventilators he delivered are not exactly the type of ventilators that are always required. There's a difference between like an intertracheal ventilator where they put a tube down your throat and a sort of mask that they put on your face. The mask, and most of his ones seem to be the mask that you put on your face. And the problem with that is that it has minimal sort of airway support. It's great if you have like sleep apnea or smoke or smokers who don't blow off enough CO2, whatever, that sort of thing, people with pulmonary edema. An actual ventilator is a very different animal. You actually have to be intubated, and that like puts tubes in your trachea and gives you support. So ventilators help, if you have a support, a failing system. So, and also the other reason that this is a bit of a fail is that a lot of pulmonologists realize that different people have different tolerances of O2 in their system, and not everybody needs to be intubated at the same level of O2 in their system, but a lot of people now are just intubating preemptively, because you don't want people to die. So yes, Elon Musk delivered a lot of quote-unquote ventilators. No, Dr. Elon, not all your ventilators are the right ventilators, which goes back to my theory that he's actually a supervillain and he doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about because celebrity halo effect. And yes, I still have beef with him because he ripped on AI all this time, and that's my field. And that's me.
Yeah, man, I always imagine one day when Odin is a multi-millionaire, him and Mr. Musk are going to encounter each other at like a cocktail party and just lock eyes, and then Musk is going to be like, oh, Mr. Moja, so how many ventilators did you build in the past few years?
I'll be like, technically, you didn't build any either. You just built masks that breathe for people.
Sorry, I can't hear you over all this money.
Yeah. So, I don't know. Those are mine. And like, you guys can comment on that. I guess we've got to close this out. But any comments on that, Ian?
Just briefly, very briefly, I think a lot of people who have been criticizing Trump all along for his handling of this thing seem to think that he's in his Oval Office or in Trump Tower or at Mar-a-Lago, and he decides, today we're going to have this sort of response to the disease. And they forget that he has to consult with people who are supposedly experts, and Fauci is obviously one of those people. So I don't think people understand that there's a consultative process, and that Trump is then the one with Fauci who comes and presents that to the public. So first of all, there's that. So there's just whatever he does, people are going to find fault with that. So they're either going to see, he closed the country too quickly, or he didn't do it quickly enough. Same's going to be with he opened it up too quickly or he didn't do it quickly enough. I think what's interesting there is, if I understand correctly, the process of opening up the economy and the country again, he's now given that responsibility to the governors of each individual state, which means that the response from those states are going to be a very interesting indication of whether people are going to act in the greater good or for the greater good, or whether they're going to deliberately go against what Trump has, the way he's been leading. It's going to be interesting to see. Just with regard to Elon Musk, I think we need to also understand that the machine that he's produced is probably not completely useless, and it's going to be around beyond the pandemic. So when the next one strikes, I think the whole world, and the USA included, is going to be better prepared in terms of providing the support for people who have respiratory problems. So I think, you can be a little bit forgiving, but obviously you don't want to give him clemency quite yet. So I understand that. That's all from my side.
Imagine Odin getting the coronavirus and getting hooked up to a ventilator and glancing over to his side and seeing it's a Tesla brand one.
Oh, he's going to disconnect it immediately.
He'd rather
take death.
I'd rather die. Damn you.
Yeah. You won't take hand sanitizer from AfriForum either. So.
Well, I'll happily take hand sanitizer.
No, I'm joking.
Yeah, thanks for that. Like I said, Ian, I enjoyed the Donald Trump versus Donnie from Queens section because it's so predictable that like he has his presidential moments, and then because he's like this guy from Queens that can't let anything go, he always turns into Donnie from Queens. Eventually, it's just that's who he was long before he became a politician. And I mean, it's absurd. The people who are the worst haters of Trump now, 20 years ago, were his biggest buddies and biggest admirers. Yeah. So when he was just a celebrity and a sort of guy flashing about a lot of money, people loved him. And now that he's a Republican president, he's hated. And
me and Odin always joke about the amount of rap songs that used to mention Donald Trump.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Ernst, your take before we wrap this one up?
Well, my take specifically is probably just my conclusionary thoughts on everything and like wrapping it up. I think the thing that we've seen now during this COVID-19 thing, not just in South Africa but across the world, is how susceptible our fellow citizens are to becoming little dictators. I think there's a lot of wannabe dictators walking among us, and I think it's become evident now. So I hope you're all taking notes to see who will snitch on you for just this little thing. And I think it needs to be a requirement that on every episode of the No Script Show we dunk on the snitches, because I think that's a moral imperative at this time.
I think so too. Yeah. Yeah, Ian, if you want to shill your Twitter or anything like that.
Where can the people listening find you?
Oh, people listening can find me or on Twitter. My handle is @HabibiSouth. Habibi is the Arab word for darling or my sweetheart, my beloved. So HabibiSouth. Yeah. I'm quite open about who I am. So my real name is on there, Ian Van Zyl. My real picture is on there, albeit in black and white. So yeah,
it's a good picture. I exempted you.
Thank you. I need to remember which one I used. Is it the sort of Dolce Vita one?
I think it is. I won't include Jade Marsdorp in there for exemptions because...
No, you should. She's one of the good eggs, that one.
Okay, you know what? I would. It's just that I'm afraid that if I do, it'll come off as simping. It starts with this and it ends with me sliding in her DMs and saying, please can I have pictures of boob? Or something like that. So I'm just not going to... No, I'm kidding. It actually is a good picture. I'm just being a dick. But it actually is a good picture. But yeah, I think that's where we can find you. Anything else you want to show before I close this out?
No, that's it. Twitter and the same on Instagram, but it's not very interested unless you want to see pictures of cats and you want to see me playing some live music. Yeah, you're welcome to do that. But otherwise, I'm just on Twitter. Sometimes I do use swear words. That was something else that was contentious this week. But yeah, I think they just give me some more power sometimes when it's needed.
Exactly. Yeah. Thank you for your guest slotting, Ian.
Thank you very much.
We'd love to have you on. You bring an element of class to things. so far. And for me, obviously, you can get me at WotanZA, Conscious Caracal at Concar. What? At
Concaracal, yeah. Concaracal is one character too long for the username on Twitter, so I had to shorten it. But at the moment, if you just type in lockdown Caracal, you'll find me as well. And you can find
at Concarol, and you can catch the show
Caracal.
Concaracal.
It sounded like at Karen.
Karen. And you can catch the show at noscriptshow.com. There should be some links there, and I guess we will see you guys next week. Thank you so much, everyone. Cheers, guys.
Wash your hands, please.